Hi, I'm Kate Holmes, Executive Director of the Women's Center of Halton, where we support women through crisis, trauma, and distress. Today, we are joined with Malerie Rose from Rose Family Law
Hello.
to talk about some really important issues. And one of those issues that I would like to discuss today is mediation. I know that mediation has been a hot topic out there right now, so tell us about mediation and your thoughts around that.
So first of all, mediation can be a great dispute resolution process because it allows the parties to come together and they work out their issues without going to court. They come to an agreement that they've brokered themselves,
Right.
alone or with the help of counsel, and then they're more likely to stick with the agreement because they've worked it out themselves and they've come to terms on their own.
Great point.
So mediation can be great. Okay.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing, however, recently is people coming into my office who are often in high conflict situations, and the first thing they ask about is, "Can I go to mediation?" And the answer often is no, not at this time.
Right.
So, for instance, if you're in a situation where you have an abusive spouse, okay, going to mediation can be a problem because you have an imbalance of power. You're not going to have what we call equal bargaining power. You're not going to be on a level playing field. So that can be a problem. The second thing is family law it can seem tedious and slow moving, but sometimes you need to take the proper steps before you can come to an agreement. So what happens in mediation is the mediator helps you come to terms, and then those terms have to be enshrined in what we call a separation agreement. And the separation agreement needs to go to a lawyer so it can have what we call independent legal advice. Because you want your agreement to stand the test of time.
Right.
You want it to be able to, 5 years from now, if your spouse doesn't like it, you don't want your spouse to be able to go to court and say, "Wait a minute, this agreement was unfair, so therefore I don't want this agreement to be upheld by the court. I want you to make a ruling that's contrary to this agreement."
Right.
So one of the things that assures that an agreement will be upheld is what we call independent legal advice. Okay, because then your spouse can't go to court and say, "I didn't know what I was signing, I had advice." But what a lot of people want to do now is they don't want to do the work that's required in order to get that. So one of those things is financial disclosure.
Right.
So if you're settling property issues or support, child support or spousal support, if you're the recipient in particular of child or spousal support, you have to have all the backup documentation to assure yourself that you know exactly what your spouse's income is now, what it's likely to be in the future, what it was in the past, so that you can make a reasoned decision about what amount of support you should be receiving. Similarly with property division, which can be complex.
Very complex, and it's
Right.
hard to know where to even start.
Right. So that's where a lawyer can assist you. What I found in my practice is if it's not too contentious, after we exchange financial disclosure, oftentimes if we still can't resolve the issue between lawyers, we go to mediation and we can resolve at mediation because you get a strong mediator in who really knows the law, comes in and talks to each of the parties, and we can come to a resolution. So I love mediation for that. I also love mediation when it is a high conflict case and we've gone a couple of rounds in litigation and the parties are like, now they see that it's expensive and it's exhausting to go through the litigation process,
Right.
and then the ground is fertile for mediation. Then everybody's ready to come to the table because often at the beginning of a matter, no one's really ready for mediation. People say they want to do it, but they don't really want to do it. So you can waste time with the mediator and then you don't get an agreement.
And I feel that either way you're spending money. So if you don't work with a lawyer up front, you're going to work with a lawyer after mediation, potentially.
Well, I mean, listen, I think that there's probably a lot of people that resolve their issues without ever seeing a lawyer. And I think that's great, and if you think that you can go and you can see a mediator with your spouse and you can resolve issues and they're not complex, go ahead. If and that's great. But if there's more complex issues, if there's property division after a marriage, if there's children and you have to resolve issues of parenting time, we call it now, instead of custody and access. There's parenting time instead of access, and decision making instead of custody. And you can't resolve those things with your spouse. And then there's property division, and there's spousal support, and there's child support, and there's a jointly owned home, or there's a lot of issues, and it's going to be a lot. It's going to be complex. What I'm trying to say is there isn't really a shortcut.
Right.
Much as it would be great if there was. I think people that can resolve their issues at the kitchen table don't ever really have to see a lawyer.
Right.
And that's great. But once you're engaging a lawyer, chances are high that you're not going to be able to step right into mediation without doing the work.
And it is hard.
That answers the question.
It does. And I hope that our viewers today are able to glean some information. If you want to reach out to the Women's Center for more information, absolutely do that. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries.